Hello and welcome to another philosophy video. In this video, I am going to discuss the Kalam cosmological argument. I think that this argument has been, especially in the last 10 years or so, has been one of the most discussed arguments among philosophers and non-philosophers as well. And I think it's one of the most controversial and most interesting argument in the history of philosophy. Well, what is the Kalam cosmological argument? Before we get there, I want to say a few things. First, this argument is my interpretation of the Kalam cosmological argument that you can read in its entirety and all the details in a paper that I published in 2021 in the Heathrow Journal. The title of the paper is a little misleading because it doesn't bear the name Kalam in the title. I wanted to do something different. Perhaps in retrospect I should have called it the Kalam according to me. But anyway, this paper, the link to the paper will be below the video. Also, I would like to talk about some preliminaries points. First of all, the Kalam is an argument. So, as all the arguments, I'm not going to give a lecture on logical arguments. I have several lectures on my YouTube channels. I welcome you and encourage you to go and look and watch my videos. But a very quick point about argumentation. Arguments can't be either deductive or inductive. Inductive arguments, let me start with inductive. Inductive arguments are arguments where that follow in the inductive process. And this means that an arguer would offer some reasons to believe that a certain conclusion is more likely than not. So the arguer does not present the argument as claiming that the conclusion follows necessarily from the premises, but rather the arguer sets up the argument, presents the argument in such a way as to show that the conclusion is probable, that the conclusion probably follows from the premises. And of course, if you're the arguer and you present such an argument, an inductive argument, you would want to show that given the premises, the conclusion is very likely to be true. And what we call that in logic is a cogent argument. On the other hand, deductive arguments are so called because they follow the deductive process of reasoning. Deduction is a process of reasoning that uses premises that are claimed to lead to a necessary conclusion. Now, of course, the premises sometimes do not necessarily lead to a conclusion, and we call there's a technical name for those arguments. They're called invalid. So an argument is invalid when, given the premises, the conclusion doesn't follow at all. Another argument, type of deductive argument, is a valid argument. Now, a valid argument means that, given the premises, the conclusion necessarily follows. But a valid argument, mind you, is not necessarily a good argument. Not yet. Because valid means that the conclusion follows necessarily from the premises. So if I say something, for example, like Brooklyn is in Africa, okay, that premise, I can use that premise to set up a valid deductive argument. For example, if Brooklyn is in Africa, then it follows that Brooklyn is not in the United States. And then the second premise would be Brooklyn is in Africa, therefore it follows that Brooklyn is not in the United States. This is a deductive invalid argument, but there's a special name for this argument. It's an unsound argument, meaning the conclusion follows from the premises, but one of the premises or multiple premises are false. So a good deductive argument is what we're looking for. And there's a special name for that. The name is sound. A sound deductive argument is valid, and also it has true premises. But what is truth, you might ask? It's a great question. Now, think about this argument. It's a very simple argument. All apples are fruit. All fruit contain vitamins. Therefore, all apples contain vitamins. This argument is called, the form of this argument is called Barbara. That's because of the mood. It has three A's, three A-form statements. Now, this argument happens to be valid, but also happens to be sound, because it is true that all apples are fruit, it is true that all fruit contain vitamins, and it follows that all apples contain vitamins. But here's the problem. Is it true, the conclusion, is it true with 100% certainty? Well, nothing is true with 100% certainty, because suppose that I am in the matrix. Suppose that there are no fruit, apples, and vitamins. Then, of course, the argument will not be a sound argument. Well, what are the chances that we are in the matrix? I don't know. It depends who you ask. If you ask some philosophers, they will tell you that there's a very distinct chance that we are in the matrix. If you ask other philosophers, they would say that it's so extravagant and ridiculous, and that we have more evidence that we are not in the matrix than that we are in the matrix. But the point is still that we could be in the matrix. It could be an illusion. And so, what's the point of this? The point is, when you present a deductive argument, sometimes you encounter arguments, or you present arguments like this one, the apples argument. And it seems very easy to prove that the premises are true. But as I demonstrated, you could be in the matrix, you could be under an illusion, and you don't know with 100% certainty. So we accept that the premises are true based on something else that we accept. We accept the reality of the world. We accept the denial of the matrix. We accept that we have good evidence, or at least more plausibly true, stronger evidence that we live in a world, there's an external world, there are other minds, and the matrix is false. Okay? So, now the bottom line is that in presenting my argument, my version of the Kalam argument, I'm going to show that the premises are more likely to be true than not to be true. Okay? I can be convinced otherwise if you can present to me some good arguments to show that the premises are more likely to be false than to be true. Okay, next point is the following. The Kalam cosmological argument is very often advertised by philosophers as the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God. Now, technically, the Kalam is not really an argument that proves the existence of God, because, after all, there's no God in the premises and no God in the conclusion. It doesn't say, therefore, God exists. So the word God does not appear anywhere in the argument. So the Kalam is an argument, at least in my case, in my interpretation, that proves a conclusion, this conclusion, that the universe came into existence by something else. Okay, the next point is the Kalam cosmological argument has been used typically by theists, by people who believe that there is a God with a capital G, a theistic God. I am not a theist, and I argue that you do not need to be a theist in order to run the Kalam argument. So belief in God is not required. As a matter of fact, I came to the Kalam argument, and I came to the conclusion that the Kalam argument is sound argument without any belief in God. I still, to this day, do not believe that there's a God with a capital G. I'm not a theist. If I have to tell you what I am, if I have to call myself something, I would say I'm in the camp of deism. But I don't have faith. I don't go to church. I don't pray. I don't believe anything of the stories there are recounted in the Bible or any on the Quran, any religious books. Not because I don't like them, but because I don't believe that kind of God exists. So the bottom line is, I don't believe that the Kalam argument is a sound argument because I believe in God, but it's the other way around. Next, I wanted to say something about the terms that I'm going to be using for my argument. So let me define them. I'm going to use the term created objects. Now, by created objects, I mean things that begin to exist. What are the things that begin to exist? Well, they're divided into two labels. There are physical created objects, like pizzas, like babies, and also non-physical created objects. This would be something like a concept. For example, the concept of justice is a created object, according to my definition. And also a thought. A thought, at least as far as I understand it, a thought or a mental image is a non-physical object that was created by a mind. Now, what do I mean by beginning to exist? This is a very simple idea. Think about a cappuccino that you're drinking. You're drinking a cappuccino right now. Now, it's a very simple question, as I said. The cappuccino that you're drinking right now did not exist in 1985. Now, granted, you might say things, very clever philosophical things, such as the water that made this cappuccino already existed in 1985, and the molecules that created the cows, that created milk, things like that. The point is, this cappuccino that I'm drinking right now, I just made it, and it came into existence. It began to exist insofar as it is a cappuccino that I made right now. Very simple. Now, I'm going to use also the term uncreated objects. Uncreated objects are those objects that just exist. The explanation why they exist is because they exist. They are their own explanations. There are no physical things, as far as I know, that are uncreated. Because all the physical things, including the universe, I'm going to argue, are created. Everything that we know, telephones, pizzas, people, countries, planets, everything that is physical was created. Okay? However, there might be non-physical, uncreated things. Well, theists, for example, if you ask a Christian, in Christianity, in Islam as well, the concept of God is an uncreated person, meaning it's eternal. God just exists, according to theists, okay? Also, many people would say to you that numbers are uncreated, okay? They are eternal. Okay, now, the next thing that I want to define is coming into existence or beginning to exist. I want to define this in the broadest possible sense. Something can come into existence from pre-existent stuff, pre-existing material, all at once. For example, a pencil dot on a piece of paper. Okay? It comes from pre-existing material. I hit the paper and I produce a dot. But also, something can come from pre-existing material gradually. Like, for example, a house, brick by brick, or a baby, or a drawing. Now, there are also things that come into existence without stuff, without pre-existing material. They could come into existence all at once. For example, a thought, okay? Or, for example, gradually, like a concept. Like, for example, I'm developing a concept, so I think about it, and that concept gradually come into existence. Now, I'm going to use the phrase something else or by something else. What do I mean by something else? Something else can be an object. For example, amino acids bring into existence a protein. So a protein is brought into existence by something else, and that something else is an object. Or something else can be an agent, like a carpenter, that brings into existence a chair. Wonderful. Now we are ready to outline the argument with all that under our belts. My version of the argument has two premises and a conclusion. So it is a syllogism, and it's presented in the deductive form. So I claim that the conclusion follows necessarily from the premises, and I claim that the premises are true. Therefore, it's a sound argument. Premise 1, all created objects are brought into existence by something else. Premise 2, the universe is a created object. Conclusion, Therefore, the universe was brought into existence by something else. Okay, now, why do I think that premise 1 is true? All created objects are brought into existence by something else. I believe that premise 1 is true for at least 3 arguments. The first argument is very simply one of the oldest axioms of reasoning, that being cannot come from non-being. By non-being, I don't mean an empty space or an empty box or a low entropy or anything like that. What I mean is the negation of reality. So it would be impossible to have anything, any physical reality, from non-physical reality. Okay? It's that simple. The second argument is that the truth of premise 1 is confirmed by science and experience. We know that tables, pizzas, concepts, sounds, thoughts, babies, everything physical was brought into existence by something else. We don't have evidence, zero evidence, less than zero evidence, that an object came into existence by nothing. So I believe it is true. The third argument is that if the universe came into existence by nothing, in other words, if P1 is false, then it is just inexplicable why it happened only one time. Why did it happen only one time for the universe? Why don't we see other things spontaneously coming into existence? Why don't pencils and cell phones and anything really comes into existence by nothing? At least we must have seen it at least twice. But why just once? Why just once for the universe? Now, of course, there are people who say, well, it happened once, maybe it's happening and we don't see it. Well, that's not an argument. Or other people say, well, it can happen, but not in the universe because the universe has laws and rules. But I don't see what law would prevent something from coming into existence by nothing. If you know this law, just let me know. If you're thinking about the causal principle, well, the causal principle is not a hand, something that moves and regulates things. So I don't see why a pencil should not come into existence right now by nothing. So because of these 3 arguments, I think that premise 1 is true. I think it's very hard to refute the truth of premise 1. So let's move on to premise number 2, that the universe is a created object. How do we know that the universe is a created object? Well, assume that the universe is an uncreated object. What does that mean? It means that the universe is past eternal. But what does that mean? Well, it means that the number of years, if you want to divide the universe into years, the number of years that's behind us in the past is an actual infinity. Now, the concept of actual infinity refers to a completed infinity, namely a collection that contains a discrete number of members whose number is infinite. Mathematicians talk about actual infinity a lot, referring to things like sets. For example, the set of all integers, all the integers numbers. Now, before you complain about it, I'm going to mention this. There are different types of infinity. I just mentioned one, okay? But this is the one that is pertinent to the argument, to the infinity of the universe. Because if you believe that the universe has no beginning, you believe that it is an actual infinity. That there exists an actually infinite number of events prior to today. Now, the problem with actual infinity is that it is not a physical reality. Just think about it. You can talk about an actual infinity of numbers because you think about, you just think about the concept that there exists an actually infinite number of numbers. You don't see them. You cannot count them. Because if you try to count them, you will never get there. You will never count them all. Why? Because there's an infinity of them. So the idea of all the numbers is really something theoretical, something conceptual. But when you think about how this might play out in reality, it's impossible, because think about it. Is there an actually infinite number of coins? No, that's not possible, because any object is finite. You can always add one more. Okay? So, as a concept, it's perfectly fine. As a reality, physical reality, no, it doesn't exist. Well, how do you know? I have 5 arguments for the finitude of the past. Once again, I believe that premise 2 is true because of these 5 arguments. And if you can find an argument to show that any of these 5 arguments should be doubted, let me know. The first argument is the infamous or the famous Hilbert's Hotel. We all know the Hilbert's Hotel. I'm going to spare you from the explanation because this is a very, very famous argument. You can Google it. This involves a hotel that has an actually infinite number of rooms, and you can fit an actually infinite number of guests. In fact, you can keep sending guests to the hotel and they will never run out of rooms. But then there are certain anomalies that happen when you subtract guests, which shows that if the infinite room hotel really existed in real life, it would lead to absurdities. And because we don't accept absurdities, then we don't believe that actual infinity can exist. Now, I wanted to point out, by the way, for those people, those philosophers who say, well, even if there are a lot of paradoxes of infinity, they don't impress me. Some philosophers say, just because something leads to absurdity, it doesn't follow that it cannot be real, because science is riddled with things that are absurd. Think about space-time how it bends and lights and so on, Higgs boson and particles and so on. Those things are absurd when you think about it. Their behavior is absurd, but nonetheless we believe that they exist. So why should absurdity lead to the impossibility of a concept? Well, I want to point out that that's exactly how one of the strategies that we use in philosophy. In philosophy, we use something called reductio ad absurdum, which is an argument to the effect that you try to refute the opponent's argument by showing that it would lead to absurdity. Okay, so this is a strategy that is used by all philosophers. So I find it amusing when philosophers try to say that absurdity doesn't show that a concept is impossible to be instantiated in physical reality. Well, that's exactly how we determine that certain things are possible or impossible, because they lead to absurdity. The second argument is maybe sound extravagant to you, but it's an argument. So my argument is this. Suppose that the universe has an actually infinite number of years. Now, starting from today, the present, when I'm right now when I'm talking, 2024, the year 2024, okay? Suppose you go back 23, 22, 21, etc. And you ask how many years are prior to 2024, the answer would be an actual infinity. Now, if the age of the universe were actually infinite, then any number of years could be added or subtracted without changing the age of the universe. Think about it. You can, for example, subtract all the odd numbered years, 23, 21, 19, 17, 15, and so on. Remove those years, and still the age of the universe will be the same. This, you might say, well, it's not an entirely new argument. It's a different version of the Hilbert's Hotel. Well, if you like to think that way, then be it. I think it's another argument. Argument number 3. Remember what I said. Given the idea that the universe is eternal, this leads to the idea that prior to 2024, today, there are an actually infinite number of years. This is, with this thought in mind, we can run an analogy. The analogy is, say, a building like the Empire State Building. I'm in New York City, so I'm thinking of the Empire State Building. Suppose that the Empire State Building, they tell you that it has an actually infinite number of floors, just like the universe has an actually infinite number of past events. Now, suppose that you find a person in the lobby that says to you, I walked down all the floors. Now, this seems to be impossible because, now think about it. Would it be possible to walk up the stairs and traverse all the floors? It would not be possible because even if you have all the time in the world, you will never get to, you will never pass all the floors. Why? Well, simple, because there's an infinity of them. Now, if it's impossible for anyone to traverse all the floors going up, why would it be possible to traverse the floors going down? It's impossible. Okay? So if it is impossible for anyone to traverse all the floors from infinity to the lobby, similarly, it would be impossible that the present moment exists and traversed an infinity of prior moments. Now, the fourth argument is a scientific argument that everybody knows. That's the Big Bang Theory. I know. The Big Bang Theory has received a lot of criticisms. Not only that, well, not so much criticism, but modern physicists today, especially atheist physicists nowadays, say, oh, no, baloney. The Big Bang, first of all, might be false, and the Big Bang doesn't say that the universe came into existence all of a sudden by nothing and from nothing. There are a lot of alternative models that either say that the universe is eternal or that the universe came into being by nothing. There's no need for God or anything like that. Well, the problem I want to say is that all these alternative models are not successful. If they were successful, then you wouldn't learn about the Big Bang as being the model of the universe. All these models are theoretical. They have a lot of problems. I'm not going to discuss them. I'm not a scientist anyway. I'm not qualified to discuss them. But I can tell you this. According to the famous Bohr-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, these three eminent physicists proved that the universe had a beginning. Any universe that is expanding had a beginning. Therefore, the universe is not eternal. This is what the theorem says. Number 5. Here's an argument. You might not like this argument. You might object to the premises. Well, this is my argument. If an actual infinity of physical things existed or could exist, then we would be able to detect it, observe it, or show that it is physically possible without leading to absurdities. But premise 2, we never found or detected or observed an actual infinity of things or shown that it is physically possible without leading to absurdities. Therefore, an actual infinity of physical things is an absurdity that does not and could not exist in physical reality. Now, absent any positive evidence for an actual infinity of physical things, I must conclude that such a collection does not exist, and it cannot exist, cannot be physically possible. Come to me with an example, a physical example, or some proof, some good evidence, not mathematicians say so. That doesn't count as evidence. And then we will have a discussion. So because of these 5 arguments, I believe that premise 2 is true. This, of course, leads us to the conclusion that the universe was brought into existence by something else. But this leaves the question unanswered. The universe was brought into existence by something else, but what brought the universe into existence? Does that mean God or a God? Now, what brought the universe into existence must be something that was not created, an uncreated object, and also immaterial, because material comes into beings at the Big Bang, at the beginning of the universe. Also, space and time come into existence. Consequently, whatever brought the universe into existence must be timeless and spaceless. And of course, very powerful, not only to bring the universe into being by using nothing, no pre-existing material, but also fine-tune the universe for intelligent life. And this is what I call a God. A God. Why a God rather than an object, a non-physical object? The simple reason is because non-physical or abstract objects are effete, meaning they have no causal power. They cannot modify, they cannot change things. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Suppose that there is an eternal laptop with an eternal a stone that is resting on the F key of that laptop. This is very simple. We have to assume that the pressure that is made by the stone upon the F key brings into existence the letter F on the monitor. So if I were to ask you, what brought the F into existence? The answer is simple. The stone's impinging pressure, exercising pressure upon the F key. But if the stone is eternal, if the stone has been resting on the F key eternally, when did the letter F on the monitor come into being? Well, the answer is simple. The F would be there from eternity. Okay? Certainly, the stone does not have decision power. The stone cannot decide when to bring into existence the F. The stone cannot say, I'm resting here on the F key, and I want to exist here without the F on the monitor. And then at one point say, snapping its stony fingers, now I want the F to come into existence. That's not something that the stone cannot do. In order to do that, you need an intelligence. You need something that possesses intelligence and freedom. Freedom to decide when to bring something into existence. This is why I call it a God. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that the universe came into being by something else. And this something else, by further analysis, we come to an understanding that this something else cannot be an object, but it must be a being that is endowed with freedom of will and intelligence. That's what I call a God. So this is the Kalam cosmological argument according to me, Dr. Alvaro. Feel free to share your thoughts. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be glad to discuss this argument and the premises and clarify any concept for you. Till next time, hope you enjoy the video. I'll see you next time for the next video.